we're recording.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. This is a special edition of Between Two Teachers. I'm Madeline Cronenberg.
No, you're not. That was a trick question. I'm Madeline Cronenberg.
Will the real Madeline Cronenberg stand up? I'm Consuelo Lara. Excuse me. I don't know what I'm doing. Too many Zooms, I think. Yeah. Well, real quick, I wanted to make a recommendation for a book that would be great reading, and that's called Slaying Goliath, and it's by Diane Ravitch. And I think it's very important for us board members to know and understand the corporate role that they're playing in our school districts and budgets, etc. So that's one. And then I wanted to give out a shout out to Mr. Eric Wagner. I've been reading his public comment, but haven't said his name. So I wanted to thank him very much for that public comment that he gave. And it's on I read it out on the last episode. Okay, so that's it. And now
today we have a guest, and it's so appropriate that we're talking about slaying Goliath, because Goliath came to Oakland Unified a number of years ago, and Goliath was named Go. And Go Public Schools has a real history, a political history, not just a supporting parent group history, but a very political history in Oakland Unified. And we've invited someone to come and share out with us where that history began and the impact it's had on Oakland Unified as a whole. And that is our good friend, Mr. Mike Hutchinson. So you're here, aren't you, Mike?
I'm here.
You're here.
I'm not there. I'm locked inside, but somehow I'm still there.
We're all locked in Zoom land now, right? Yes. This is where we all live, the land of Zoom. So tell us a little about your background with Oakland and the background of Go.
Well, I'm proud to say I'm born, raised, and educated in Oakland, a proud graduate of Oakland Public Schools. For me and my family, actually, my mom was a kindergarten teacher in Oakland for 40 years. So my family has had a longstanding, deep connection to our schools. For about 20 years, I worked in our public schools and in our recreation centers, giving direct services to students, running after school programs, setting up summer camp, Saturday school, coaching teams, basically everything besides classroom teaching. And in 2012 in Oakland, we experienced a round of mass school closures where 5 elementary schools were closed in June of 2012. Of those 5 elementary schools, 2 of the schools were schools I had been working at for 10 years. And so there was a group of us, kind of a group at each school, that during the 2011-2012 school year, we really tried to organize and figure out a way to save our individual schools. And in the end, we weren't successful in saving those 5 schools, but we were successful in pushing back the school district and the school board from their plan to close 25 more schools over the next 5 years. And during that, we taught ourselves a lot, and I got to November of 2012, and we had school board elections in Oakland. And we were just coming off our organizing efforts to stop the school closures. I kind of looked around and running my hat in for the short version of the story got really, really close to winning, but we learned that there was a 800-pound gorilla that had developed and was now on the scene, and that was Go Public Schools. And so it was through my campaign in 2012 for school board that some of us first started to learn about how much Go Public Schools was spending in school board elections. And from there, it's kind of been an 8-year struggle go more than to try community of what.
We can't hear you.
So in 2012 is when they became very active in school board elections in Oakland. but Go was actually founded in Oakland in 2009, 2010, as Oakland was coming out of state receivership. Oakland had been under state control from 2003 to 2009. And as Oakland began to come out of state control was when Go was formed. And in a practical sense, they really formed and started to fill the void that the state administrator had been filling before. And Go was started by Jonathan Klein, was their first executive director. Jonathan Klein is another graduate of the Eli Broad Superintendent's Academy. And Jonathan Klein was first brought to Oakland to really work as
Oops, breaking up a little.
So himself was also an Eli Broad graduate. And so Jonathan Klein was, I'm sorry. Randy Ward was also an Eli Broad graduate. And what happened during the state takeover in Oakland is we started to have a lot of outsiders come into Oakland to basically strict and this policy going was part of that wave. When he left working OUS, started to work for the Rogers Foundation. The Rogers family is our local billionaires here in Oakland. They sold Dreyer's ice cream for $1.4 billion to Nestle's, and then took those profits and decided that they were going to try to mold Oakland schools in their image. And Go technically was started by Jonathan Klein with funding from the Rogers Foundation, and that was basically the start of Go.
It's quite the story, isn't it? I mean, so they came in. It's interesting that they came in at the same time that the state receiver left, right?
It's consistent with you know, how they use catastrophes to move in, how they use disasters, and then that leaves the door open for them. So yeah.
And what had really happened to Oakland and actually other cities that were under state receivership during this period is when the state administrator came to Oakland and was in control. He literally at the first meeting told our school board that they no longer had any authority. Mm-hmm. And so after 6 years of the state administrator, some of the other stakeholder groups and people and community organizations that had been influential before the state takeover, because of the work they had done, had been really disempowered. And so it wasn't just the disaster capitalism model. Go was really formed when the community was at our weakest point, and they really just kind of used their money to fill the void, for lack of a better way of putting it. And then as Go started to grow, they are now funded, their three main funders now, besides the Rogers Foundation, is of course Bill Gates, Eli Broad, the same person who runs the Superintendent's Academy. And then there is, I don't want to call them an organization, there's something called New Schools Venture Fund. Mm-hmm. Just what it sounds. It is a venture fund, it is a slush fund for billionaires from across the country, and they're actually based in Oakland also. And then those dollars, they pool these to leverage policy decisions and actually to incubate and start up small education businesses. And so Go now, at this point, Go actually has multiple wings. Along with starting Go, what also started at the same time in Oakland by the same people is the Oakland Public Education Fund, which is kind of the fundraising wing to fund a lot of these policies. And for a lot of us, it looks like the separation between these organizations doesn't really pass legal muster. They've even shared many of the same board members in the past. So we have Go, have the Oakland Public Education Fund, and then Go also runs a PAC, a political action committee, of course, which is where they raise their money to fund candidates in school board elections. Go, the main Go body, is kind of the policy wing, and then the Oakland Public Education Fund is the fundraising wing. And technically, they're supposed to be a lot more separate than they actually operate, but they use those three bodies as a way to facilitate all of these millions of dollars that they've raised from across the country, and then work in conjunction to use that to leverage policy decisions and control of Oakland School Board.
And they've done that. They've expanded now, right? To we know they're in West Contra Costa, but they're also in Fresno, right?
Yes. So they started in Oakland. They moved to Richmond from there, and I think it's now, sometimes the years blend together, but 2 years ago I think they moved on to Fresno. And what they basically did is they developed this model in Oakland, and now they're exporting it to other cities. Nationally, we call these groups AstroTurf organizations.
Right.
They are fake grassroots. And one of the problems, I guess, when we've had to interact with them or even push back against them is they claim to be a membership-based group, and their members tend to be parents and grandparents of color who are really looking for a better education for their students, who are really looking for someone to listen to them and raise up their voices. And in my opinion, Go provides a false promise of that. Go claims to lift up the voices of its members, but what seems to happen is every time that there is a policy put forth by Go, it comes directly from their leadership, and it is not informed by their members. And more than once over the last 8 years, there's been a Go policy that in the end, even their members couldn't back. Because there's just really a cognitive dissonance between the two. Go will say that they are neutral on charter schools, but you really can't be neutral on charter schools in the way these policies work. And so for me, I am wholeheartedly pro-public schools. And I don't think that charter schools should be feeding at the public trough, receiving public dollars that they manage privately. Go pushes a position that all schools are equal, charter schools, right, public schools, and that if anything, charter schools don't get their fair amount of these resources. And that's really been the push and the pull, and it becomes very politicized when Go in Oakland basically has had control of the school board for 8 years. And so decisions that like a closing of a school that should be based on academics and economics and community will wind up getting politicized and turned into a question of whether we have too many schools or if that school should be closed to move in a charter school instead. And it's really politicized a lot of these decisions. Beyond the other kind of big part about how they operate that isn't talked about enough is because Go raises money from billionaires, from, like I said, New Schools Venture Fund. We'll use New Schools Venture Fund. New Schools Venture Fund gives seed money for businesses to start education businesses. And so, for example, not only do they give money to groups like Go that are community-based organizations, they have given money to a company like Amplify, which is based out of New York, which was started by other Eli Broad graduate, Joel Klein, no relation to Jonathan. And Amplify provided reading materials and a reading program out of New York.
Right, Klein was the superintendent, New York,
yes,
the chancellor,
yes,
right?
Yes. And then he took this business over on his way out. This was his golden parachute. Well, 3 years ago, Oakland contracted with Amplify for them to provide services in OUSD. Now, these services were specifically for reading services for English language learners. I don't know why Oakland would need to contract with a company based out of New York to provide those kinds of services. And more than that, Go has spent millions of dollars to elect the school board we have with money from the New Schools Venture Fund. Then the school board members that they paid to elect do business with companies directly started by the groups that have funded their campaigns. And it seems illegal. It's definitely not proper. And so there is a long list of companies that have, through the networks, funneled money to these school board candidates and now members. And now these school board members have voted contracts for those same companies, totaling millions of dollars. And actually, the most egregious example that we have is a little more convoluted, but I think it's important that people hear some of this, is the role that the Oakland Public Education Fund plays in Oakland. They contract with OUSD for millions of dollars every year to provide services, everything from helping with messaging to providing manhood classes under their Office of African American Male Achievement.
That lives in the Oakland Ed Fund?
Yes, so the Ed Fund, when you go through the contracts of outside providers for OUSD, or you go to a school board meeting and they have their consent report where they just vote on all these contracts,
right,
you mainly see multiple contracts being given to the Oakland Public Education Fund. So they have been the outside provider with the highest total of contracts for years. And I don't believe some of the numbers I've been given, but it's been totaling over $4 million a year. And we actually think it's a lot more than that. But it gets worse. Up until last year, when it finally expired, the Oakland Public Education Fund for 3 years had a contract to be the fiscal sponsor of OUSD.
You're kidding.
Every charitable contribution made to OUSD was funneled through the Ed Fund.
Oh my
God. The Ed Fund took 7% off the top of their fees, but the capper was this contract and agreement. The MOU finally ended last year in 2019. During the 3 years that the MOU existed, we never once got an accounting or an update of what monies went through the Ed Fund. And even when the MOU ended, there was no money paid out at the end, no accounting at the end of that. And so not only have I never heard of an outside, privately run agency being a fiscal sponsor of a public school district, we didn't even know what money was going through there. So for those 3 years, if you went on the OUSD website, maybe you were somebody who had extra money and wanted to donate to our school system. If you clicked on the donate button on the OUSD website, it sent you directly to the Ed Fund. Now, that's beyond the fact that the Ed Fund is also in charge of fingerprinting for all volunteers in Oakland. So if you want to volunteer in Oakland, you have to go down to the Ed Fund to be fingerprinted. For the last 4 years, now I don't know this year now that this MOU ended, but also the schools that did have PTAs in Oakland were all told that they needed to give their money to the Ed Fund for the Ed Fund to hold their money for them. And so
They were the fiscal agent for every PTA?
Some held out, but there was a directive sent by the district, because technically the district doesn't control the PTAs, but
right.
the directive went out that the best way to do it, this is how we're handling it now. And so, yes, the Ed Fund was in charge of all of those outside, outside dollars. And this is just kind of the slippery slope that we've created in Oakland. It's just like, so what's also happened for us here is our organization, Oakland Public Education Network, when we were founded in late 2012, beginning of 2013, one of the things that we explicitly wanted to do was to be a counter to Go, because we saw that they were doing all of these things and there wasn't a counter on the other side at all. And so we really wanted to be that counter, and we worked really hard to begin to inform the community and get out messaging about what was really happening and how they really operated. I would say we did a pretty good job of putting a taint on Go, where we don't see Go, like they don't turn out members with Go t-shirts at school board meetings anymore, or those kinds of things. But what they've done for 2 years now, 2 to 3 years, is they've used their other organizations in their network to be the front now. So it's been the Ed Fund out in front. We have positions in our school district that are funded by the Ed Fund, which means they control those employees. It got so bad where our school district, because our administration building was intentionally flooded in 2013 to try to sell it to developers.
Yeah, I remember that.
Different story. We rent office space at 1000 Broadway in downtown Oakland for our administrative offices, which is a huge waste of money.
Right.
But one of the things within that lease, we actually sublease 2 offices at 1000 Broadway, 2 offices that are right next to the superintendent, and OUSD subleases those offices to the Oakland Public Education Fund. So they're literally given an office next to the superintendent within the district offices. And so, and really, in a larger sense, as we see what's going on around the country, there's this huge push. I try not to use the big words. Some people will call it neoliberal and a lot of things like that. But there's really this big push for, especially Oakland School District, to fill the gap by turning to philanthropy. There's been this narrative created that we're in financial disaster. And the second part of it is, and the only thing that will save us is if we can live off of the largesse of these billionaires who are around.
Right.
And that's where the Ed Fund and then Go have really been successful, because then they step in, especially with their contacts to the school board and other elected officials, and say, well, we'll be that billionaire for you. Here, we'll give you the money, but here's the policy that we want that money attached to. Here's the program we want our money to run. And in a larger sense, and it's kind of, like Diane Ravitch's books, especially Slaying Goliath, it's these billionaires have come in and used their money to leverage policy decisions. And in Oakland, we really get it from both sides, because our school board is so under the thumb of Go, where they literally are Go candidates that are elected. And then, of course, they facilitate these policies of bringing in more outside dollars and adhering to more of these outside policies.
Right. Now, the Oakland Ed Fund is now being led by Joel Mackey. Is that right?
I think so. They just had another turnover. So I
Did he leave?
I'm not sure.
Because he came from the West Contra Costa Ed Fund.
Yeah, well, and so here's the other thing about it is, all of these people are literally interchangeable. And so I spoke before about the Eli Broad Superintendent's Graduate Academy, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
They have this whole network of people and cities that they've taken over. And these people literally float from one city to the next. And so there will be lots of movement between the Go people in Oakland, or the Ed Fund in Oakland, and what happens in West Contra Costa County. There's this huge movement for school district employees, superintendents going from one city to the next. You saw when Oakland's last superintendent left, Antoine Wilson, he left because he had a job in Washington, D.C.
Yes, right. And then he didn't last there very long.
Left less than a year. We see now that John Deasy there was just a vote for him to resign.
They accepted his resignation in Stockton.
Yes, well, and John Deasy was the superintendent in LA for years, and actually was the lead trainer at the Eli Broad Academy when he got run out of LA, partly run out of LA for a scam involving buying iPads for $1,600 each. And so these folks, unless there's some that are locked up in jail now, like Barbara Bird Bennett, who's serving federal time for basically backroom dealing when she was superintendent in Chicago. And that was the third city that she had been superintendent of. You can go down the list of cities that have had these Eli Broad superintendents. They tended to get themselves in trouble also. And so one of the things that I think, besides bringing up these issues, it's really hard sometimes for us to get a clear understanding. We get caught up in some of this language and stuff that really makes it hard for people to figure out who's who. One thing that I really try to rely on is following the money. I ran for school board twice here in Oakland. I'm running again this year. Hopefully this year's going to be different. But I hold the record in Oakland. After 2 elections in 2012 and 2016, I had $500,000 spent against me. $500,000 spent on my opponents, largely from Go and these billionaires. Mm-hmm. One of the things about Go and these billionaires that fund them is they don't spread money to both sides. They will not give money to individuals, candidates, or organizations that don't follow their policy prescriptions. And so it's really, at this point, it's actually easy to figure out who's who by looking at who funds groups.
Yes.
Right.
And so if a group nationally, if a group is funded by Eli Broad, the Walton family, which
Bloomberg.
owns Walmart, or Bill Gates, it guarantees that they are putting these privatization policies to outside providers. Then there's another secondary level of billionaires who have been doing it too, like Arthur Rock out of Texas. We have our local billionaire, the Rogers Foundation. There's literally about 24
We have our
billionaires
billionaires.
national.
We have the Chamberlains and the Scullys.
Yes, and it's the same kind of model where most of our cities have a local billionaire. They tap into this national network of billionaires, and they just flood the city with so much money. It's really hard to push back against some of these things.
Well, it's interesting, Mike, on their website, on the Go website, where they have the page where they talk about their desire to expand to places where they are needed. One of the criteria for them being needed, besides there being children who need their support, is there must be friendly funders that they can partner with. And if there's not friendly funders, then you don't meet the criteria. Yeah.
Well, and I've been obsessive about reading some of the materials. It's interesting when you read through it. Yes, friendly funders. They also talk about friendly government systems or friendly school boards. You know, these same people actually prefer school districts that have been taken over by the state or the county, or that have mayoral appointed school board members. They don't like democracy. They don't like having to engage.
Right. Mr. Tubbs was very disappointed when Mr. DC departed the other night. Right. He's a perfect example of that. He's very connected to Mr. Bloomberg. He was maybe the first person in the state of California to endorse his run for presidency, because they are so close in the mayor world, right? Because Bloomberg had invested so heavily in all of our mayors. London Breed, all of these folks were very connected and were the first ones to endorse him. But that's the same group that have been as connected in ed reform. And
I've forgotten, left off Bloomberg from my list of billionaires there, but Bloomberg individually spent directly in my school board election for school board District 5 in Oakland. And sometimes it feels like it's a conspiracy, or it feels like we're the crazy ones to think about why would the ex-mayor of New York want to spend money in Oakland school board elections? But it's been proven. This is what's happening. And a lot of these ideas, just to tie the conspiracy all the way together, a lot of California's state legislation, like Prop 39, like even the charter law, come out of ALEC, out of the billionaires and the conservatives meeting together to come up with policy prescriptions. For the charter school industry and the people who want to privatize education, they have had a plan in place for 20 years for California, and they've actually executed it fairly well. And their stated goal was to take over local school boards and the state assembly to be able to control policy on a state and local level, because that's where education policy really comes from. And so they have followed this model across California and across the country. One of the things for Oakland and even for West Contra Costa County is, since we were really early in the timeline of school districts being taken over by the state, and when Oakland was taken over by the state in 2003, charter schools were still being presented as incubators of innovation.
Right.
It wasn't until about 2010, give or take, that it really became about privatization. And it really was a shift there, and an explicit shift. And when that shift started to happen, That's how really they were able to steamroll us so much there. We had lost a lot of our local control, and a lot of people believed in innovative schools that could
Yeah.
spur larger innovation. And it really took a while for us to realize that it had now been taken over by billionaires and Wall Street, who saw public education as a vehicle to turn a profit. And when we talk about privatization, what that really means is extracting a profit margin out of our scarce education dollars.
Exactly.
And that's what they've really been pushing. But we've really started to turn the tide now. And just the last thing in kind of summing it all up, Donald Trump being elected actually really changed a lot. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say it yet, but for a lot of the work I do, Donald Trump and then Betsy DeVos were the best things we could have ever had. I went and testified at the Department of Education against Obama's Department of Education when Arne Duncan was the Secretary of Education. They had the same policies that Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos have right now.
Right.
I mean, that was the Democratic policy also
Right.
for a long time, but we've shifted it. And between us shifting it and having the figureheads of Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos heading up these policies, it's really put first a wedge in the Democratic Party, but now a larger wedge in the community. And now kind of for us, just like how we worked really hard to attach a tank to Go in Oakland, where a lot of people kind of know that Go is a problem now. They might not have all the details, but we just really worked hard to frame it that way. The same thing has happened for charter schools and privatization nationally with Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos. And I think it's really, it's helped us. And at least in education, I mean, Trump is horrible. We can all agree on that. But in education, they really haven't been able to roll forward any new policies to make things worse. Like there hasn't been a new No Child Left Behind or a new Race to the Top. And there's even now battles over whether charter schools are going to be funded nationally. And so a lot of this has been because of the awful figureheads in DC on top of the work a lot of us have done locally in our communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about how the Go mentality gets into the community, in fact, even into our social justice organizations, other nonprofits, services that are for our children of poverty, because they donate. And so that's what I feel like we have this gang of people. And then it sounds like that the whole community is against us but it's actually that control that they have out in the community that they're using for the narrative of, oh, it's a failing district. It's a failing district, so that, we need new schools, and they just pound it into people's heads. So that community part, can you talk to about that a minute?
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways, Go has been really good at what they do. And one of the things is, generally speaking, they're nice to people. And when people seek them out, especially families who feel like they're not listened to, they lend a sympathetic ear. They part of their organizing model is to identify local leaders and, in their words, lift up those local leaders. In our words, get their hooks in them and offer them a job so they go and work for Go. And so if you look at them over time, especially in Oakland, they have churned through folks of color as their organizers. And what happens is they bring in somebody who's known, and a couple years later, usually that person realizes what's really going on and they kind of leave. And so even for me, folks from Go in Oakland used to regularly call me up just to check on me and see how I was doing. And so they've been really successful at that. And then for us on our side, like, I don't have money to offer those parents a job. And so at a certain point, there's a competition that we haven't been able to really compete in. But the other part of it is they have unlimited money, and they've still been unsuccessful in really getting done what they want to get done. Because when their policies have kind of been exposed to the light of day, they don't really stand up very well. And so our experience has been to really try to bring things out into light. Go can get stuff done if they're allowed to have a private conversation with school board members. The policy shows up on a school board agenda, and before you know it, it's voted on. But when we've been able to bring those processes out into light and let people know what was going on, have people show up at meetings, force the school district into an authentic engagement, Go has been very limited in what they've been able to do. And so a lot of it for me at least has been realizing that Go doesn't represent the community and never will. I know for me, I wear, being born and raised in Oakland, I wear it on my sleeve as a badge of honor. It's something else that they can't compete against, because they are, Go and a lot of these groups really represent the same colonial model that people have been fighting against for hundreds of years, where they have well-financed people coming into our communities and basically using their money to co-opt community leaders to buy into their policies, and then kind of push those policies on the uneducated masses. And they've been successful, but now we've seen in Oakland, they were only successful up until a point. And they really are in retreat in Oakland, partly because, like I said before, their policies don't stand up. We had this big thing last year, Go's big policy. They had a campaign called One Oakland, and the policy that came out of it, they called their opportunity ticket. Now they pitched it to their members as they were going to change the enrollment practices of OUSD so that families in neighborhoods that didn't have access to quality schools could attend schools in other neighborhoods. That's how it was pitched to their members. I actually found it offensive that they called it an opportunity ticket, but that's what it was. They were saying, we're going to give you the ticket out of your neighborhood to opportunity.
Right.
I didn't like the whole setup, but I also knew that it's real easy to read the enrollment policy and know that this was never going to happen. So they approved this opportunity ticket, but they kept changing the language. And what turns out, what the school board approved, the way it reads is, if you are attending a school that is closing, or if your school is closed, you have an opportunity ticket, so you get priority enrollment at schools going forward. That is very different than being in a neighborhood that traditionally has been underserved. And so like this year, the only students who are being offered an opportunity ticket this year are students from the elementary school that's being closed, Kaiser Elementary. Kaiser Elementary, granted, only 30% of the students live in the neighborhood, but Kaiser Elementary is a privileged school in a neighborhood with houses that sell for $2 million each. So in the end, this policy was so bad, the only students and families who are going to benefit from it are the students who are already privileged to begin with.
Yeah.
And this was Go's signature policy that they worked on for 2 years. And so, I'm going to say it again, in Oakland, we do not have people showing up for Go anymore. They don't even bring people out to school board meetings. We don't have much pushback around the name Go, but Go created a new organization in Oakland called Oakland Reach, because Go had a position, entrepreneur in residence. And so, yeah, I'm gonna say that again, entrepreneur in residence, a six-figure job.
Really?
Oh yes. Before, there was a younger brother named Charles Cole who was in that position, and he now has started his own organization that gets funding from the New Schools Venture Fund called Energy Converters, and he's kind of on the circuit as a young black male face, talking about all the good things his billionaire buddies do. The person who filled that job after Charles Cole, they hired Lakeisha into that role. I think it's Lakeisha Knight. Lakeisha though. And after serving 1 year as the entrepreneur in residence for Go, they gave her seed money to start this organization, Oakland Reach. And so Oakland Reach is a direct spinoff of Go. I mean, I have the tax returns from Go where they show how much they were paying Lakeisha for this job. And so that's kind of what's been happening. So I go back and forth in my head. It's a really bad thing because they're just going to keep rolling these groups out indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
But the good part is we have forced them to have to come up with a new name, a new branding, a new way of doing it because we've been so successful in fighting back against Go. And really this year in our school board elections in Oakland, this is going to be the time where we really find out if we've been successful or not, because we have 4 school board seats up for election, 4 of our 7 seats, a majority, and all 4 incumbents have said they're not running for re-election.
Really?
Yes, and I believe 3 of them for sure, but most likely none of the 4 will run for re-election. And with 4 open seats in the past, this would be a time where Go would use their overwhelming money to really flood everything with 4 open seats. But we're going to see what happens this year. I don't think they're going to be as successful this time. But we're going to know for sure now in Oakland, either we're finally going to beat them back and have a different school board, or they're going to really gain control for 4 more years. And then we really don't know what's going to be left of our school district. And then just the last thing I want to make sure to throw in now too, the other issue a lot of us have with Go and these other groups is the leaders that they identify and then promote. And I'm going to speak specifically about the people on the school board. Because their money has been such an overwhelming factor in our school board elections, we have wound up with a very low quality school board. The bar is not high. They weren't required to really have a good information base coming onto the school board or to run. They haven't been forced to come up with policy ideas. They don't even have real connections with the community, most of them. And so now here we are in this moment of extreme crisis where we've never seen this before. And we have the worst kind of leadership in place that we could possibly have. And, you know, it's not just that elections have consequences. We now have a school board that their first action at the first meeting they held over Zoom under this crisis, they voted to give the superintendent the authority, the unilateral authority to make any contract she wanted up to $500,000. And they literally just washed their hands of it. At our school board meeting we just had this week on Wednesday, on a school board meeting over Zoom call, where most people can't access the call and there's no translation services available at all, they decided with no real notice to extend our superintendent's contract by 2 years, even though her contract wasn't there until 2020. And so at our school board meeting 2 weeks ago, at the last school board meeting, the same school board voted 4-3 with a Zoom meeting to give a charter school a 40-year lease to one of our public school buildings, 40 years. And so this is kind of the outcome of having Go as a player in Oakland.
Yeah.
It's not even the charter schools. Like our number of charter schools hasn't grown really for 5 years, but we've had the highest rate in California for that time. Right. And even charter schools in Oakland don't want more charter schools because there's not room for more competition. And in Oakland, there has been more than once where there has been friction between Go and the California Charter School Association, because they don't always walk in lockstep. Shades of gray. They see some things a little bit differently, but Go has been the main player locally and really pushing these policies and being the front for it. And so we see now with this leadership in place, we're really at the mercy. We're worried about if OUSD will reopen or what it'll look like.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
You know, we're unsure with this school board in place. It would only take a vote for them to move to a distance learning model where all of a sudden internet learning becomes the norm moving forward. Like there's all of these things that are at play. And for us, we don't just have this crisis and we don't just have a Go bought school board. 4 of the 7 school board members are lame ducks who only have 6 more months. And now meetings are being held in a way where most of the community doesn't even have access. And so, and the sad part to me, kind of to tie it all together, is this is another time where Go has been silent. You know, here's one of the secrets in Oakland. For 8 years now, there has been no translation available for any school board materials.
Really?
No school board packets, let alone the information.
None. Wow. Wow.
Now, first started going to school board meetings a long time ago, it used to be there in every language, because the trick used to be if you got there too late and you couldn't get the packet in English, you take it in Spanish. But we don't have anything there, any translation services. So here's this group like Go that says they're all about lifting up the community voice and representing marginalized communities, or school board members or who say the same thing. I've literally been the only person to stand up at a school board meeting over the last 8 years and say, there's not even translation here. Where is even the basics? And so that's really where, you know, like I said before, bringing it out to the light of day, but also having a real discussion for these issues. They are literally incapable of standing up with the community for these issues. There's race and class issues among Go's leadership and the communities that they claim to serve. And it all gets played out over and over. And so what happens for somebody like, I'll just speak for myself, somebody like me, is then also I become the target of certain people's individual hatred, for lack of a better way of saying it. Because really they Go, and some of these groups aligned with them, survive by paying folks of color to be the faces out.
To do their work for them, yeah.
Fear is strong voice, who are really rooted in the community, saying, no, the emperor has no clothes. No, that's not true. This is not how it is. And they don't have a counter for me. You know, for other folks, if it's somebody who's white and from the hills who stands up and says the same exact thing as me, Go and their allies will say, oh, that's just your privilege. Oh, you're just being racist.
Right.
Wow.
They can't put that. Now, some of them will try to, you know, but it doesn't really work. And so that's why really, in the end, their biggest fear is an informed and educated community, because they know they won't be able to operate then.
Exactly. Well, I have one more question for you. How can I get Go's tax returns?
So, good question. So I have gotten very good with Google. And I've learned how to search a lot of, so in general for all of these groups. And this is what makes it hard, because we don't have the powers to look into people's bank accounts. So like, I'm always curious if certain people might be getting kickbacks, because that's the only thing that explains some of the stuff that I see going on. But unless a district attorney gets involved and somebody with subpoena powers, we just can't do that. Okay. But thankfully, many of these groups are very proud of the work that they do. And so a lot of organizations like Go, now sometimes you have to be able to navigate through their website, but Go has a page that lists their funders. And that is always important to look at for any of these groups. A lot of them are very proud of it and want to highlight it. Sometimes you even need to, on their websites, find their annual report. And they will have a list of funders in their annual report. But for Go sites specifically, if you go through it, I'm pretty sure it's on the same page that has their annual reports. They are required as a nonprofit to release their tax returns. And so you can go through their tax returns. I think it's their 1099s, if I remember off the top of my head. And so what those tax returns are not required to list all the money they get and from who it comes from. And it's not required to list where it all goes, but they are required to list employees. And so you can get a list of their staff. It has a list of their board too, even though their board is unpaid. and that will all be on their tax return. Usually there's a year or two lag, so you're looking at 2018 still, but
Okay.
it gives you an idea. And they're required to list their 1099, or that's public information.
Yeah, yeah.
And their funders list and their annual reports. And the other place I recommend that people look who are interested in Go is not just at Go, but to go to the Rogers Foundation also.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Rogers Family Foundation, right?
Okay.
There. Yes, Rogers Family Foundation, because Go is only a small part of the work that they do. And so it's what I've done as you start to do it more, then you start to see the same names places. And it's really how a lot of these connections can be made, where you start to say, oh, they're funding this group. Oh, they're funding this group. Oh, they're on the board at this group. Oh, this company supports this group. And it starts to really, it starts to connect the dots. But I recommend that. And then anyone is free to, I'm out there a lot. I'm all over Facebook, Mike Hutchinson, or the open page. I routinely have people reach out to me asking for help with this sort of stuff. I've just become really good with Google. So I don't have any special access or special information. We've just really learned how to search, and we've learned what connections.
Yeah.
This is an interesting number. I'm looking at their 990 right now, just because I know the 990 is where the information is, right? So I pulled it up from my friend Google. And Go in 2015, or between 2012 and 2015, on their 990 form, spent $910,000 on lobbying.
Ugh, I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's okay.
It's right here, big as you can see, right here. Lobbying. And the ceiling, actually, they spent their ultimate total was $1,366,000 from Go on lobbying.
On lobbying.
Right.
Yeah.
On lobbying. So and what is lobbying? Lobbying is influencing. So that's lobbying school board members, that's lobbying assembly members, that's lobbying the governor, lobbying.
And I want to know, how do we set the boundaries? Because a lot of them also get on some of our boards, like our facilities or our CBOCs, or how do we set up a boundary for that, for preventing that? Or can we?
It's really difficult, I think. But what we've been, so here's, a lot of this has sounded negative, and I guess it really is negative, but for the last 2 to 3 years, we have a string of victories, even though it might not feel like it. It was huge when Tony Thurmond,
when he defeated Marshall Tuck.
The people.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we lost him.
I'm sorry, my connection's giving me problems here. So Tony Thurmond beating Marshall Tuck and Gavin Newsom beating Antonio Verragosa. Antonio Verragosa, for the 2 years before he ran, had been coming to Oakland to do Go fundraisers with Go in Oakland, along with Mayor Libby Schaft. They are directly connected in that sort of way, both of them. But we beat both of them. And even bigger was last year with getting Assembly Bill 1505 passed through the state of California. Which brings real control to charters, but more than that, the part that we all didn't quite, I don't think, internalize enough, is we beat California Charter School Association and groups like Go at the state capitol after they had spent $10 million getting those people elected. And so their money only gets them so far. And as we keep racking up these string of victories, it gets harder and harder. To me, it's not a problem if there's somebody affiliated with Go on a committee. It's a problem when the committee is controlled by people affiliated with Go.
Right.
And that's really the issue. I have to say this. I have always been close to people who have wound up being members of Go. These are a lot of the people we've worked with in other capacities on these issues, and they just wind up being members of Go. And so I really try to stay focused that Go's members aren't the problem, it's Go's leadership, and that the leadership is not honest with the members. And so I try to point.
That's interesting.
Fighting members of Go, because most of them, if you can get all the other stuff, actually agree with most of the things that most of us are saying. But they sit in these meetings with Go leadership. Leadership tells them either that we're bad people and the enemy, or they set up this whole narrative. Go leadership will regularly tell members that somebody like me is trying to close their school or take away their choice.
Right.
And
right.
that's where the members get it. Whereas I'm actually trying to give them a real choice, not this fake choice with charter schools and attending schools in other neighborhoods, but I'm trying to make it where their choice of attending their neighborhood public school is the best choice. And unless you have quality schools in your neighborhood, it's not really a choice anyway. And so we've really been winning on those sorts of things. And just lastly, because this is my own personal pride thing, Go has had a turnover from their original leadership. I actually have a lot of respect for Jonathan Klein, for the organization that he started and put together. I used to call him the evil genius, but I meant that in actually a respectful way. He was really good at what he did. And some of their original team was actually really successful. And you can see the successes they had for their policies. But Jonathan Klein is gone now. And we're on the sea. So the work that they're doing has really dissipated over time. And so they just have this money left, and they give up because they have that money, they're funding them, but really been less and less effective, and they don't even have the leadership team in place probably currently to really follow through with a lot of things they want to.
Yeah. Wow. But that is
there's
good
the
news.
story.
Yeah, to see. I mean, it is an arc for sure of and so what it tells us a lot about what we can expect over here, and I see a lot of the same patterns, and being told, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, and it's hard to get through to people sometimes. You really have to, like you said, you have to expose it, and you have to show them, here's some facts about all of that. It's a long haul.
And I think the other thing is we fall for Go's framing too much of the time. We don't have to even have a lot of these arguments, debates with them. They're arguing about things on the side. We know what, as I'm getting towards my campaign now, it's putting together the affirmative campaign. We know what works in our schools. We know what our community wants. We don't, because the AstroTurf groups are coming in. We know that our community wants safe schools that they can walk to in their neighborhood.
Exactly.
That are quality. We know
Right.
We know that it takes fully resourcing these schools to make that happen.
Right.
We know that we need to have continuity of staff and site leadership. And, we know what makes a quality school. Yeah. So let's start from that point and let's start making quality schools instead of this whole, let's close schools, let's set up a new delivery model for they're taking us all over the place so they can extract, at least their salary, if not a profit margin, by privatizing certain aspects when it's not even needed. And so like you were saying, the false narrative that our schools are failing. I think it's really hard to fight that narrative because everyone has their personal experiences. Like, my public high school didn't let me all as they did. It's easy for people to have their own bad experiences kind of cloud all of that when, again, we know what makes a quality school. And so it's not that our schools are failing. It's a discussion of how do we make all of our schools the kind of schools that all of our families would want to attend. And that should be the starting point, or as these folks like to say, the North Star. And,
Right.
and it's really, that's been the hard part. And again, to try to tie all this together, that's why Go coming to Oakland and West Contra Costa County at a time when we were coming off a state takeover, where this idea of crisis and failure had really been ingrained in us for a generation. They were able to get farther than they might have been able to in other places. And it's really the narrative that we need to turn back, especially now with this virus and everyone's in lockdown. Like, one of the things we're starting to work on now here is it's great if senior district leadership negotiates with a teachers union leadership over how schools should reopen. But what about the community? What about the students and the families? And these are all of our schools, and we all have to be engaged in this. And whenever another group comes in that limits our ability to engage fully with everyone, it's never going to get us where we need to go.
Wow. Wow. Very enlightening. Very enlightening. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Well, this is gonna, I think a lot of people are gonna learn from this. This was really an opportunity for us to hear the full story. So I really, really do appreciate it, Mike, and wish you the greatest success. 3 is gonna be the charm. You're gonna be on that board.
Yes, third time's the
Yes, third time, third time's the charm. We would love to keep in touch with you. We'll post this, and I'll send you the link to where it is, so you can. And I'll post it on Open. We're friends, so I can actually do that. I'll upload it to Facebook and post it there, and I'll post it on our YouTube channel. And and the interesting place I'll post it is I'll post it on LinkedIn, which is where we have our greatest number of followers.
And I'll it's a couple years dated now, but I did a long write-up, I think it's 3 years ago now, the years blend together, the takeover, how 4 billionaires leveraged policy decisions in Oakland. It's about pages long, it's long. So I'll include that underneath one of the places, a link to that.
Perfect.
Please do. Please
So
do.
then the story will be there for everybody who wants to understand it. The story will be there. That's what we want to do. That's what teachers do. Teachers show you where the truth is and tell you the story, right? And that's what we wanted to do with this. So thank you again.
So much. Oh, this has been awesome.
Yes,
And
we really appreciate it.
yeah.
So take care, stay safe, and
We'll see you again.
we'll see you.
Thank you, you too.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care of your mama.